This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by Atom Audio, iZotope, Native Instruments, Empirical Labs, Sound Porter Mastering, and Trace Audio. You're hearing my voice right now through custom Trace Audio cables and the new Empirical Labs pump compressor mixed through iZotope RX, Ozone, Neutron, Nectar, and Plasma, all mixed on Atom Audio monitors. Please check out our awesome sponsors using the links in the show notes. It's a great way to help support this show. Now get ready to rock.
People are so worried about, oh my God, I got to time a line and I got to tune it. I got to put it on the grid. I can just play with stuff first, you know? And I guess I had the luxury of playing as a kid when I was blind, and then in the 80s when I was living in the middle of nowhere and had no one to be in a band with, and just experimenting. So it's not a bad thing to do, because you'll discover like happy accidents.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Native Instruments introduces the new Complete 15 bundle, featuring Contact 8, offering versatile synths, sampled instruments, and innovative effects, perfect for creating everything from emotional scores to dance floor grooves. Contact 8 includes exciting new creative tools like chords and phrases for inspiration, the Leap tool for dynamic looping, and Conflux, a hybrid instrument blending organic and synth sounds. The Complete 15 bundle also includes updated Massive X, Guitar Rig 7 Pro, and AI-enhanced iZotope Ozone 11. Use the code ROCK10 for 10% off at nativeinstruments.com. Empirical Labs, creators of the famous Distressor, offer high-performance gear for audio pros. The Fatso adds warmth to digital recordings with harmonic generation, tape emulation, and compression. The Pump, a 500 series compressor, features 8 selectable ratios, precise attack and release controls, saturation, and an attack mod for incredible transient control. The Arouser and Big Freak plugins are also available at empiricallabs.com, where you can use the coupon code RSR10 for 10% off. Follow at Empirical Labs on Instagram, making studio gear that works a little easier, a little better, and a lot longer. Howdy, Rockstars. It's your host, Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals and badass dudes. And dudettes and everybody, but particularly this guest. That's why I said that, so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Charles Root III, aka Chaz Root, a recording, mixing, and, in his own words, reluctant mastering engineer, producer, and multi-instrumentalist. Chaz has performed on releases by Goo Goo Dolls, Monkey Wrench, Stationwagon, Doombuggy, and Acme Anvil Corp. He is also a Terran-based biped who has improperly assumed human form, as evidenced by poor eyesight. Due to his poor vision, he smells and hears things that others don't, which can be a blessing or a curse in the confines of a recording studio. I can empathize with that, dude. My mom always said I should have been a sommelier or like a cheese taster or something. Chaz missed most of his sophomore and junior years of high school due to blindness and eye surgeries. That's fascinating. He spent most of that period in his room with a Walnut Explorer guitar, an excellent choice for a guitar, a Marshall Plexi half stack, and a pile of old Electro-Harmonix pedals, making sounds custom tailored to annoy his parents. Man, all I had was a beat up nylon string guitar. I thought it was right next to me. I don't see it in the studio right now. Chaz currently resides in South Wales, New York, USA, with his wife and studio partner Julie J.J. Geis, where they operate Electric Owl Works, LLC, which is an amazing studio which includes a residential recording studio, Rachel's Owl Music, a BMI-affiliated music publishing company, and the Electric Owl Works Records indie label. They're proud to have artists of many genres from around the world coming to this beautiful, idyllic setting in South Wales, New York. Big shout out and a thank you to my brother from another podcast, Matt Boudreau, for potentially having made our first introduction, Chaz. Although I do remember we were all huddling under, a tin roof or something at...
it was at Robot Lemon.
It was at Robot Lemon, F. Reed Shippin's studio, and
there was
those
a
guys at
thunderstorm.
Infrasonics.
Yeah, it was a thunderstorm, and we're all under the tent trying not to get wet.
Yeah, and that was great. That was when Summer NAMM was still happening here in Nashville.
Yeah, 2019. Yep.
Hopefully to come back again, because that was always a lot of fun. So please welcome Chaz Root to Recording Studio Rockstars. Chaz, are you ready to rock, my man?
You bet you, Liz. Let's go.
Dude, glad to have you here, man.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Fire it off. So give us a little bit more in your own words. I was joking when I said I misread it. I thought it said Terran, and I was like, oh man, did he come from the city of Tehran?
Well, no. That's funny because with my Mediterranean blood, I always get people always think I'm Persian or Italian or Greek or Spanish or Sicilian or whatever, and I'm actually some of those things, but I'm not Persian.
You're actually just cool.
I was born in Buffalo, dude. So yeah.
Right on. All right.
The city of no illusions.
City of no illusions. Well, give us a little bit more background on you. I mean, we got a little bit of that peek into your childhood rocking out on a guitar, but where did it go from there? And maybe give us a short version. How did you end up with this beautiful studio you got in South Wales?
Well, I started on guitar in 3rd grade. My parents got me a guitar, and it was one of those crappy ones from a catalog store back in the day, and it was very difficult to play with, action 3 inches off the fretboard, and that didn't work out so well. So I started playing piano around 7th and 8th grade. 8th, 9th grade, I got back into electric, got the Explorer, got the Marshall. And I had the 2 years of high school that I missed most of. And,
so that was really a thing for you, was the eyesight stuff.
Well, dude, I was blind, man. Yeah, wow. It's a fucking thing.
Wow, yeah. Man. I don't think you ever really told me that. So no. Roxas, we should preface this. I met Chaz at Summer NAMM. We all connect at, when we go out to Anaheim, California in Winter NAMM, and Chaz is, Chaz, you're a real OG rock star for the podcast too. You are one of these amazing individuals who really absorbs everything that is out there, and you show up at everything and you participate, and you're 100% dedicated.
Well, yeah. And you have to be nowadays, because with all the big studios, most of the big studios closing, the opportunities to go and just hang out with people and network and hear stories and tell stories, that's kind of gone, unless you're lucky and get a gig at, a big studio. But even Capitol shut down while they're doing their earthquake renovations. But, it's just those days of the old studios. So you got to go out and you have to support the people who are doing stuff for us, like you and Matt and a lot of the other folks. And, and the technology is changing a lot. So you just got to stay on top of it. And, you're going to ask me for an inspirational quote, and I've got a few actually, but what strikes me, I think Frank Lloyd Wright said, an artistic life is a youthful life, which means that if you stay creative your entire life, right? And and you went to architecture school, right?
Yeah.
He was designing shit till the day he dropped dead in his mid-90s or something. So,
wow.
But if you stay creative and stay engaged and stay mentally active, that's huge. That's huge. Just keeping your brain working, learn how to cook, start playing chess or something, do something to keep your brain going. Right.
Was he designing, houses in Buffalo or South Wales?
He designed a shit ton in Buffalo, because Buffalo, 100 years ago, Buffalo was the America's 5th or 6th largest city. Wow. Now it's number 40 or something. But with the Erie Canal, a lot of commerce went through here, And so there would be grain elevators. And so there was a lot of rich families here. And there's like mansion rows and all that stuff. And he was designing office buildings. Like the world's first modern office building was in Buffalo for a company called the Larkin Soap Company, which was unfortunately torn down in the 50s. But he was designing all kinds of like, this is his earlier stuff, like pre-falling water. So like his prairie style kind of homes. And there's a bunch of them here, and they are spectacular.
And that's that area would have been like the heartland for the steel industry.
Yeah, well,
years ago, right?
yeah. We had a huge steel industry here. There was Bethlehem Steel, who were huge, and yeah. So there was steel, there was shipping, and there was a way to get stuff from the Great Lakes and bypassing like Niagara Falls, because you can't send a barge over Niagara Falls. So, right.
You could try.
You could try. I mean, yeah, there's people who've done Daredevil stuff, but yeah. So anyway, so an artistic life or a creative life is a youthful life. Just stay busy, stay engaged, and hanging out with you guys is like, I see it as being part of that. And you're doing something, Matt's doing something, whoever's doing something, since I can't hang out in Berry Hill and, drink tea with Richard Dodd all the time, when I do have opportunities, I'll take them.
So South Wales is just outside of Buffalo?
Yeah, we're about a half hour south of downtown and the border crossing to Canada and the airport. So
okay.
we're in the same county. It's like a second or third ring suburb. So it's just like a half hour drive.
That's so great. Actually, I remember at 21 is when I drove through, did a summer trip, and we went right to Buffalo. I think we might have stayed there for a night, but we went to Niagara Falls, which I hadn't been to since I was a kid. And God, that was amazing to see. Talk about sound,
Yeah.
The sound of all that water just rushing over the cliffs.
Take some PZMs and a Zoom, baby.
Take some like PZMs. Have you gone and recorded Buffalo? I mean, the falls yourself?
I have not. I mean, I think I did some video stuff or something, but I haven't actually gone to like do like sound, and I probably should, but yeah, I haven't done it. And like Niagara Falls is weird because it's like people who live in the Big Apple. It's like there's so many people who live in New York City who've never been in the Empire State Building or the Statue of Liberty. And a lot of people around here have like never been to Niagara Falls. I mean, our parents took us there all the time, I think, like once we moved back here, but
I think that's the typical thing, right? Like anything that's tourist, we only ever go when somebody comes in from out of town to visit. Yeah,
it's like, I mean, I used to live in Manhattan. It's like, you avoid Times Square like the plague,
Yeah. So growing up in that area, and then of course across Lake Erie is Detroit, and so you've got Motown, not too terribly far away. Cleveland is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yep, that's about 3 hours south of us, and then Toronto and Toronto's about an hour north.
Right. And then talk a little bit about the the musical scene there where you were growing up, and any of the musical history.
Yeah, well, in my senior year, in high school, I played in a kind of a cover band, did a few originals, and that lasted, till early college. And then in college, I got a call to play in a guy that I knew who was a drummer in another band, a few years older than me. He said, hey, he asked me if I played bass, and I had taken classical 6-string because I'm classically trained, right? Mm-hmm. And I did kind of play bass a little bit, but I didn't own any bass gear. And I was like, yeah, I play bass. He's like, well, you think you'd want to play bass in this band? And like, I'm like, okay. I was doing weddings and stuff, and I was kind of like, I'd rather do like metal or Motorhead or punk rock or something. But it was like, okay, because it turned out it was really good money and it was a great education. So I played this wedding band, and I went out and bought a PVT 40 bass, got an Ampeg SVT, because this is like my first year or two of college. So it was like way before modern lightweight gear, and did that for a while. And, I was always writing songs. And so I think like 83 or whenever it was, like the first Fostex 4-track came out, the X15, and I bought that and just started experimenting with some synthesizers and just getting my head wrapped around like doing some audio recording, because I had tried, I had done a recording with a friend of mine. There was a radio station in the Buffalo area. It was called 97 Rock. And they had a thing where you could send in a demo of one of your original songs, and they'd pick 10 and put them on an album. They'd actually cut vinyl. So my friend had a couple songs he wrote, so we decided to record them, but we didn't have any recording gear. So we did the old school recording back and forth, bouncing between like home tape recorders.
Yeah.
And a mixing board.
Did you use, so you did it, but you did like an actual electrical output through the mixer as opposed to just like putting the speaker in front of the mic kind of thing?
Yeah. We did with mixing boards and stuff. So, and my cousin brought his Neil Peart drum set over, and I think I played bass on that. But actually, this guy who I've known since high school, I was in a high school band with him. I was just over at his house like a week or two ago because they called me up to record an album, and one of the songs they were playing was the song that we had recorded like just after we graduated from high school. He's finally
that's awesome, and he's
finally going to record. And I'm like, dude, you don't still have those tapes, do you? That we recorded like in 1982 or 3 or whatever. He's like, oh yeah, I got to transfer it over to digital. I'm like, send me a copy. I got to hear that shit because it's hysterical how things.
So like, what was this, 40 years later, something they finally had written a third verse or a bridge?
Yeah, no, I think he had another guitar solo. I think he just added another guitar solo, but anyway, so I was into recording like a lot and just working on my own because after college I lived even further out south of here, like way out in the country, and I just recorded myself with my little synthesizers and Casios and guitars and foot pedals, and was just hoping to, somehow get back into civilization and, play in a band and get into like a real studio, which, by like the late 80s, that started happening. So, So that was kind of your introduction to pro studios was because actually, a band that I was supposed to join but didn't join was a band from Buffalo called the Splat Cats. And they were like this garage rock band that were really freaking good. And their stuff's up on Spotify, I think, and Apple. But they were like this trashy garage. I mean, it sounded like something like, those Nuggets records. Just really, really good stuff. And their original guitar player left, and I was a fan of the band. I used to go see all their shows, and I had their little EP, like their 5-song EP, and their first album, and I knew all their songs because I didn't have a band for a while, so I just sat around playing with like Stooges records and like Psychedelic Furs or like all kinds of stuff. So I just sit around like try to figure out stuff from Patti Smith records. And so I actually knew all their songs, and they're like, our guitar player left and we're looking for people to come audition. So I went and auditioned, and I got the gig like on the spot. Then their and these guys were signed to a label, and then their manager called me, who was also at the label, and I'm not going to mention any names, but I just caught him like in telling some non-truths, let's say. Right. And I was like, because like this band was supposed to, like, they were scheduled to go to Europe and everything. I was like, cool, I'll get my passport and join this band and go gig in Germany and France and stuff. And there was some sketchy stuff going on, like financially and stuff. Yeah. And I just was like, nope, can't do it. But I was at their album release party, and that was the first studio I was in, which I think was a studio called Select Sound in Buffalo. And I remember that was like the first real studio I was in, like in the later 80s. And I was just like, yep, this is where I'm supposed to be. This is totally where I'm supposed to be. And then after that, just with the local sort of, back in the day, what we called college rock scene, right? Like the alternative, punk, whatever scene, post-punk scene. There were a few clubs around here, and everybody knew everybody. And, that's when I started making other friends and getting into other studios and, doing stuff and joining bands too. So
what do you think about as the post-punk sound? Like, When REM came along, how would you have thought about those guys? Or did you even think about those guys at that time?
Oh, no, I totally liked REM and still do. I didn't think of them as post-punk. I thought of them as more of like an Americana thing. So I saw, and they kind of are and were in some ways, like some of that early stuff. I mean, you hear the jangly Rickenbacker through Vox sound and and it was like this Americana thing that definitely you could tell there were influences from, kind of like the punk or like punk scene back then, but it wasn't as boozy as, let's say, the Replacements, who I adore also. Right.
Yeah.
But those guys, oh shit.
We were a big Replacements fan
yeah.
when I was in college in the late 80s.
Yep. Replacements and Husker Du were like my two big bands for a while. Absolutely.
It took me quite a while to get introduced to Husker Du, but Replacements, and then I liked all the weird stuff like the Meat Puppets.
Yeah, Meat Puppets.
And the Dead Milkmen and
yeah. Well,
Red Hot Chili Peppers before everybody knew who they were.
Yep. So the Meat Puppets were. I was in a band, early '90s. I was in a band, and the drummer was a huge Meat Puppets fan. So, and he wrote, and actually he was a lead, and this guy's a lead singer and amazing drummer, from the Buffalo area, and he was a huge Meat Puppets fan. And I mean, I've got a bunch of their records too, but
yeah, they're good.
They were just doing some crazy shit out in the desert, I think. So,
Sounded fun to me.
Someone asked me a while back, do you fear AI will one day replace you as a mastering engineer? Well, it hasn't yet. That's because algorithms don't listen to music or to clients. Hi, I'm Brian Murphy of Sound Porter Mastering. When I master, I experience the music as your fans will, with the honesty of fresh ears. And unlike AI, I master with your intentions in mind, not merely to process the mix and boost the levels. If you want an experienced live engineer to master your music as only a human can, find me at soundporter.com.
Sick of searching for the right cable or wondering how to hook up your studio? Trace Audio has you covered. Based in Nashville but serving studios everywhere, Trace Audio specializes in custom cables, patch bay labels, and wiring solutions for home and pro studios. Try out the free online custom patch bay label designer at traceaudio.com to easily color code, label, and organize your XLR or quarter-inch bays, which are popular with home studios. It's sleek, professional, and simple to use. Then use the code RSR15 for 15% off printing and shipping your custom patch bay labels to take your studio to the next level. Your mic sounds really good for this. Tell us what this is. What do you got going on for your setup here? Because like I say, this is the podcast where you get to talk about what are you talking into.
Well, this is new. This just showed up last couple of weeks. So this is a Sontronics. I think it's called the Podcast Pro or Broadcast Pro. And I saw them at NAMM, and they are a UK-based company. They make like handmade mics in the UK. And this is sort of a broadcast style mic. I guess it's geared. It's a more budget-friendly thing going after the market who's interested in RE20s or SM7s, but they were like 2 booths away from PMC speakers at the NAMM like a month or two ago, and I saw these mics. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to try it, and they were pretty good. So I ended up buying 3 of them. So
right on. Is it a condenser or a dynamic?
It is a hypercardioid dynamic.
Right on.
And it has like a 3. And I'm not using a pop filter on it, but it has a 3-stage internal pop filter thing, which apparently I am blasting right past. But so I should have probably put a windscreen on it, but
well, we'll find out. Rockstars, you can tell us afterwards whether you're getting any of the P-pops and stuff.
It
sounds like a condenser. Cool. It's kind of cool. It's got a condenser quality to it.
Yeah, and I don't need to use a cloud lifter on it either.
Right, that's a handy thing to just have enough level for podcasts.
Yeah, it's got a higher output. But yeah, those guys are super cool at NAMM. So
right on. So Sontronics.
Yeah, Sontronics.
Okay, cool. And then what about are you doing like a fancy mic pre, or is this just straight into an interface?
This is going into my old Focusrite Claret 8 Pre X, which is the Thunderbolt which was their top of the line Thunderbolt one, from like, I don't know, 2018 or 2019. So, yeah, it's got, ADATs in and out. So you can do 20, I think it's like 24 or 28 channels in, 32 channels out. And that's what I was rocking for a while as far as, like my main interfaces go. And now it's just sort of a backup thing.
Right on. Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's one of the reasons why, it's sort of funny. Initially, it's like you have your studio set up and then you upgrade and then you never want to throw anything away and you keep the old stuff, but then it's hard to figure out where to use the old stuff. But now, because there's so many needs for various interfaces for things, it's kind of like come full circle where now it's like I can just hook up a second interface onto my studio computer just because I'm going to need it for a Zoom call or for a, live stream or something.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a UA Apollo Solo like 10 feet away from me, but which I could run the plugins on it because it has the chip where you can run the plugins, like the UA plugins and all that. But the I kind of have it for portable stuff, but where I just need a couple tracks. But the integrated headphone amp on that thing is like not my favorite, so I end up not using it because of the headphone amp, which is really silly. But
well,
anyway.
we were talking about the P-pops on a microphone. One of the things that I find really helps is when we just take the mic. I think our instinct sometimes is to talk straight into a mic, but then the wind blast goes directly into it as well. And sometimes if we get the mic close, but it's kind of like pointed at the corner of my mouth, I find that does a trick.
Which is what I'm doing right now.
Right on. All right.
Is that working for you?
I think so. Yeah. Rockstars, let us know. All right, cool. So then, this, the Select Sound was like a first studio experience for you. And did you like intern or assist there?
Not there. Because not there. There was another studio called Trackmaster that was
Trackmaster. Okay, cool.
Yeah, which was the I don't want to say big studio, but I think they started like in the mid 70s or something like that. But so they were the ones where I started getting my foot in the door a little bit, because my friend Robbie Takek, who's the bass player from the Goo Goo Dolls, before he was touring all the time, like they are now and selling platinum records, he worked as a DJ for a local radio station, and he worked like the night shift at this Trackmaster recording studio. So Trackmaster was a 3-room facility on multiple floors, and actually Robbie owns it now. It's now called GCR Studios. And it was mostly broadcast. So they did all the jingles for all the regional TV things and radio. And I'd go in there and hear him working on stuff, and it would be like, oh, that's the Buffalo Bills song, or the song for the hockey team, or that bank that did all their ads there. So they did all the broadcast voiceover for, AM radio, FM radio ads for TV spots. So it was it was a broadcast. It was a lot of that, but they had a huge room upstairs. And it's a John Stork. John Stork was the architect. So it's an amazing room. And Robbie was always like, hey, you want to come in and help me? I'm like, yeah, So I would go in there from time to time and help him. So I was never employed by the studio, like as an intern or as a runner or anything like that. But I would go in and help because Robbie had the keys to the place and did like all the late night stuff. So all the punk rock demos and EPs and all that. So I would help him. And then when his band was doing stuff, I would go in and help with Goo Goo Dolls stuff, because they had an engineer named Armin John Petrie, who's a producer engineer, who did a bunch of their early stuff. He did a lot. He's still working with like the 10,000 Maniacs. So he did 10,000 Maniacs, Goo Goo Dolls,
cool.
Late 90s, early 2000s. I think he was the producer for Sixpence None the Richer, who was sort of, I think, kind of a CCM thing, but they had like top 10 singles.
Yeah. What was it? Kiss or something like that was one of their big hits.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So, and I've known Armin forever too. So Armin would call me up and say, hey, you want to come in and help? And, on these various sessions at Trackmaster. So, they had an Auditronics 532 console. So it was a 32 channel console, probably designed in the mid 70s. And Auditronics, I think they were from Memphis because it said Memphis machine on the back. And this one was like, there was only 7 of this model made because this thing you could mix down to like quadraphonic. So it had quad on it. And it also had like some primitive 70s like fader automation. So it was really, really cool. And so it was like really, really cool. So, and it's in a John Stork room, and the live room was big with, 18, 20-foot ceilings. So it was a really cool place. And so they teach you how to clean the tape machines, how to calibrate them and bias them and all that stuff. And yeah, I was never on the payroll, but it was just one of those things where if you have, it's like if I see you and Matt at NAMM, if I have an opportunity to help you guys out, I'm going to do it because it's just like a cool thing to do. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, learn how to, work these 2-inch 24-track machines and bias them and calibrate them and learn how the patch bays work there. And they had 3 rooms that were all tie-lined into each other with, 140 plate reverbs and all kinds of crazy stuff. So it was just a great place to go hang out and help people out because it was fun. It was fun, and I was learning shit and getting, free beer and chicken wings. So,
what was some of the stuff you remember learning that just kind of gave you light bulbs or blew your mind back then?
Well, I had kind of learned this from my live sound days, but like using buses on a console, right? So it always just struck me as like when I was a kid, like late teens, early 20s, it just seemed like needless overhead. But then all of a sudden I was watching a live sound guy and watching people in the studio, how they were like watching how they were using buses. And I was like, oh, then a light bulb went off. It's like, oh, okay. So I can take those like, 6 microphones that we have on this Marshall cabinet that we probably don't need, but we can bust them all down because this is 2-inch tape days. So everything's going to 24 track. So they would bust everything down, and the output of bus 1, let's say, which was, 6 mics on a Marshall, were going into, 1 tape input, on track 14 or something. Yeah. So just like using buses and, that was like a big light bulb moment where it kind of bugged me at first, like doing sends and returns and buses. And like when I was a kid, it just seemed like silly, like, why do you need to do that? But that was something that I learned. I mean, from doing live sound and from being a track master, it's like, oh, okay, I get it now.
Yeah,
it totally works.
I remember the fascination with signal routing. I mean, that's like one of the first things you really learn in a studio is just like, what goes into where and where is all this sound going to get to all the places it needs to get.
Yep.
And it still is. I mean, we jokingly, Rockstars Chaz and I had to we had to figure out some signal routing just to do a podcast, because that stuff is important.
Yep. So it's just helpful stuff that works, and I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, I learned about, busing stuff. I came to appreciate it. And actually, the other thing I think I learned at Trackmaster was, it was the first time I saw, like, I'm pretty sure Armand was doing like New York City compression, right? Which is what we called it back in the day. So
which is what, parallel compression?
Yeah, so he would send stuff out and then return it. So he would send stuff out to like Yamaha SPX 90s or the 140 plate, or they had some old like Yamaha digital reverbs there. They had a whole bunch of old stuff there back in the day. And instead of returning them to like the send on the channel, they just return them to like, 2 faders and stereo on the console. And then, oh, guess what? You can EQ that. So you can fine tune that echo return or that reverb return. So like learning stuff like that with your hands on a console is like friggin' amazing, and it just, and we still do it now in the box,
Let's jump forward. So now you have this incredible studio that you built, and I want to make sure you really get a chance to describe it to us. You built your studio, Owlworks, which is, or Electric Owlworks, excuse me. But it's in this beautiful location, sort of in the woods, but it's also where your home is. But it also, I think, did you also set it up where you can have guests staying there when you need to make a record with somebody who wants to really come and just like, live the whole experience?
Yes. So, and this is actually our second studio in South Wales, because we had bought a home that we thought was our forever home back in 2014. And that was a big place too. It was like 3,500 square feet with like 7 bedrooms. And it was huge. This monstrous house. And I had a studio set up in there with guest rooms and everything. And then this place came on the market, and it's only like 2 miles away from our old house, maybe 2 miles away, but it's like 5,300 plus square feet. It's in the woods. It's on the side of a hill. It started as an old hunting cabin in the 1940s, and then a doctor bought it, 59 or 60, a very prominent cancer research scientist and educator, doctor guy who was a multimillionaire. And he took this hunting cabin and started doing these mid-century additions onto it. So it's all different levels. It's like, I like to say it's like Frank Lloyd Wright meets the Brady Bunch. Right. It's got like that kind of mid-century thing going on.
Right. So, it sounds like it's a bit of an adventure.
Yeah. Well, it's turned out to be an adventure, as you can see from the cinder blocks and construction materials behind me. So yeah, that's I'm up in my B room right now, which I have new light fixtures going in. There's a hole in the wall where my soffit speakers are going. And I've got all the entire ceiling up there is all acoustic treatment. And then
I can see the white above your head in the video.
So that's like 8 inches of various insulation. And then behind that front wall there is like 6 feet of like acoustic treatment, because that's a fabric wall with rock wool and rock board. And then behind it, we have hanging mass load vinyl hanging down, and all kinds of insulation. And I got a bunch of good tips from Barry Grint, who's a mastering engineer in the UK, and Richard Dodd, who I spoke with several times. And he's
Richard's so great.
Yeah, Richard's so friggin' awesome, man. And he was full of tips. And then Sam Moses, who has a podcast, he's a mastering guy in Nashville. Mm-hmm. So he had some tips on what to do also. But yeah.
Well, now what you described in the back of the room you're in now, so you're describing a control room setting, right?
Yeah. So this is my B room up here.
Yeah, and then that stuff in the back, mass loaded vinyl, fabric, but then there's a whole bunch of depth behind it. That essentially creates, a bass trap, an acoustical collection zone that can collect all that low end and sort of dial it down.
Indeed. And one of Richard Dodd's things, and this is another one of my quotes, actually 2 quotes, one attributed to Albert Einstein, which is in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. And then my Richard Dodd quote, which is, turn your disadvantages into advantages. And they kind of tie into each other. So what Richard was telling me when I was talking to him about like this place is, he's like, well, do you have an attic space above you, or do you have like, cause like this room's like, I don't know, 12 by 26 or something. So it's not the best room in the world, but Richard's like, well, if you have an attic above you, or if you have room underneath you, you can put holes in the ceiling of your floor, and your bass will go up into your attic and be able to escape this room. I'm like, really? That's an interesting idea. So that's what we did. We have screen in there in case a squirrel or raccoon gets in the attic, just so nothing comes crawling in through my like control room wall. But we turned like the disadvantage of a small room into something like really sonically cool, because we've got bass traps and took all this advice from, these mastering guys, and the room sounds great.
Adam Audio proudly announces the D3V active desktop monitors and H200 dynamic closed-back studio headphones, designed in Berlin for pro-level monitoring in home studios. The D3V features 3.5-inch woofers with ribbon tweeters for studio-quality sound in a compact design ideal for songwriters and producers. The D3V includes USB-C and balanced analog inputs, a headphone output, and DSP room acoustics. The H200 H200 closed-back headphones feature powerful 32-ohm drivers and comfortable ear pads in a durable metal construction, making them perfect for studio or portable use. The included plug-in enhances tonal control and stereo spatialization, so you never have to leave the sweet spot at atomaudio.com. At iZotope, saturation just got a whole lot smarter. Introducing the new iZotope Plasma plugin to supercharge your sound by giving your tracks exactly what they need, precisely when and where they need it. Unlike traditional saturators that apply a static effect, Plasma's groundbreaking flux saturation technology analyzes your sound and applies dynamic processing, adding targeted warmth, depth, and character to bring out the best in your mixes and masters. Use the secret code ROCK10 to get 10% off the new Plasma or any of the awesome plugins at iZotope.com. That's something similar that I did in my live room, not in my tracking, not in the control room, but in the live room. It's narrow, but it's tall.
Yep.
But what I did is it does something that I saw Carl Tatz design for Monty Powell's studio, where the live room is narrow and tall going up, and then it goes over into a loft area above the control room, so it makes use of that extra space. And then when I was at Electrical Audio, Steve Albini, those guys designed both the control room and the mid room, and I think even maybe the big room, they all speak through ports on the edge of the room down into the basement area, so they expand the size and shape of the room to let the lows escape.
Yep. Yeah, because we hung out with John Stork a bunch, because I've always adored John Stork's rooms. I mean, they just look amazing and they sound great, and and we just didn't have the budget to pull his team in. And, we talked to John Brandt and a bunch of other people, and, Carl Tatz, and ultimately, it's like, if you can do some math, right? It's not hard to figure this stuff out. Yeah, it's work, but if you don't mind putting a little time in, you can figure it out and make stuff happen and do it right. And doing it in a DIY fashion just, always kind of seemed like the right thing for my wife JJ and I. It just, we've got a whole workshop full of awesome tools and power tools and and all that. And so we well,
it's fun to do. I mean, one of the things about home studios is they're hours, Yeah. It's the one place where you can infuse your own personality and style into it to whatever level you want to, and allowing a DIY approach to it where we borrow all these things that might work pretty well and we incorporate them is a great way to do it.
So we've got this room upstairs, and I'm sitting in what's going to be the back of the room right now, but back here, I'm going to have two vocal booths that are going, kind of vocal areas that are going in. So I can do light duty overdubs up here. And somebody wants to track an acoustic or two singers or some percussion, or even somebody threw a little AC-15 or a little bass amp or something. Which
but then the bass escaping means that you've tuned it where you can mix it pretty well. You can mix in there well.
Yeah. Plus, I'll probably use Sonar Works in here just to get the room, fine tuned. But our last studio, 2 miles from here, I worked my butt off to get that room in good shape. And, and that was just an old bedroom, kind of like what you're in now, I think, that I converted it into my mix room. And when I ran test tones through it, everything was within 3 dB of the test tone, except for one spot at 150 hertz, which everybody gets dinged there. So I had it tuned really good with a bunch of homemade acoustic panels and a bunch of GI cake stuff that we had bought. And I had that room tuned up really nice. So it's I've done it before, just do it again,
Yeah, that's great.
So You know, and because this house was owned by a prominent doctor, we don't want to just totally gut it, which is what a bunch of people were telling us we should just gut it and blah, blah, blah. We're like, well, it's kind of like a known architecturally significant house with certain people in this area, and we just don't want to butcher it because, you know, I'm not going to be around forever and my wife's not going to be around forever and somebody's going to have to buy it someday. So we don't want to totally like butcher it up and take the character away from it. But so yeah, we're trying to be respectful of what's there, because every artist who's come in here is like, holy shit, can I live here forever? You know, because it's just
because it's got a cool vibe.
Yeah, well, outside this window here, which the rock stars can't see, but there's a creek and a little waterfall that go down right on the north side of the house.
Beautiful.
That go down to, it's sort of a tributary into a bigger creek, which is called Hunter's Creek, which is the road we're on. And
sorry, we're just punching mics, rock stars. We're just punching mics.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, it's a really cool location. It's really, really cool.
All right. I want to switch to ask you about Studio A, but before I do, what are these cool headphones you got on right now for the podcast?
These are, well, I use them so much that the logo's worn off. These are the Olo Audio S4Xs.
Cool. That's what I got in my studio too.
Okay. So, okay. Yeah. These are the open back ones.
Yeah. So hopefully we're not getting too much of my voice coming back, but hey, there you go. Rockstars.
Yeah.
Me.
Yeah. I don't have my cans on too loud. So
yeah, that's the trick. That's what I do with these. When I do podcast interviews, I got headphones on, but I just turn the volume way down. Yeah. Yeah. These have been like game changers. I mean, you know, for the money, they, I think, hold up pretty, you know, they're kind of, I don't want to say like Cali speakers where they punch above their weight class, but these guys definitely punch above their weight class. Are they a $2,000 a pair of Odysseys? Well, no, but are they pretty close? They're probably 90% plus there, I think. You know, and I've done mixes on entire albums on this thing, because like once we moved here full time in 2021 and I didn't have like my room set up, I needed to continue working. So I had these headphones, which like saved my butt. So you know, when I got mine, the first listening test I did was listening to Hotel California on them.
Okay.
And man, they just sounded so good. They just
They're really good for the money.
The tom fills were so cool sounding. I was like, these are great.
Yeah.
70s all right, so let's go over to Studio A. Describe that to us. And then I think you guys are doing more than stereo you're setting up for, right?
Oh, yes, we are. So yeah, Studio A, the live room is like 30 feet by 18 feet with, I think, 16-foot vaulted ceilings.
Wow.
It's a pentagon shaped room. So it looks out, it's on the north side of the house. So it has like pretty much floor to ceiling windows that look out over this little creek and waterfall. And it's kind of triangular shaped. So if you've ever seen those old videos of Le Studio in Canada, with the old Rush videos in April Wine, and you see Neil Peart sitting in front of a window with his drum set, and it's like this triangular shaped room. It looks a lot like that. So it has that mid-century kind of Frank Lloyd Wright look with all the wood and the beams in the ceiling. So it looks kind of like Rudy Van Gelder's studio in Jersey, where he did all the jazz records.
Wow.
So it has that look. So
that's the control room, or that's
that's the live room.
Live room, okay.
The next to that is the second kind of live room, which I have a shit ton of keyboards in. It's okay to swear, right? Yeah.
Yeah, fuck yeah.
So, yeah, I've got a bunch of whirlies and Rhodes and uprights and synths and stuff in a keyboard room, which is like a 16 by 12 foot room that is another live room. And there's like big double doors between the keyboard room and the live room that I could open up or close, so I could use it for an upright bass. I can use it for isolation for a vocalist. I could put a drum kit in there if I wanted to, or like some acoustic stuff.
That's great.
Then on the south side of the live room is the mix room or control room, and that room is like 26 by 18.
Wow, that's nice and big.
Yeah, it's super big, and we were configuring it for stereo and all that stuff. And, you know, yeah, I don't want to get like too controversial on your podcast, but I'm
Bring
kind
it.
of in. I'm kind of
Bring the
into
controversy. We love
bring
it.
the controversy, dude. Yeah, no. I had heard my first Dolby Atmos mix I heard was when I was at Blackbird in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And oh my God, what's the engineer's name? He was mixing
David Leonard?
Yeah, it was David. He was mixing the Prince record. And I heard When Doves Cry in the Blackbird room with all the wood finger things sticking out of the wall.
Yeah,
so
I was probably standing next to you.
Yeah, you very well may have been. I was just like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? And I was like, oh my God. So I'd had it in the back of my head, since 2019 and just never really pursued it. And then NAMM, I think 2022 NAMM, or no, 2023. I'm getting my years mixed up. Last year's NAMM, my wife heard Atmos, who's also 50-50 studio partner with me. She heard Atmos mixes for the first time and she's like, are you kidding me? We need to do this. We need to put this in. I'm like, really? She's like, yeah. And I'm like, you realize it's going to be kind of a few dollars to make this happen, right? She's like, we're doing it. We're doing it.
That's great.
Because we already have client artists who've been mixing, putting binaural sounds in their mixes for years.
Yeah.
And so we already have clients asking us about it. So we're like, well, all right, let's do it. So yeah, we're doing the Atmos thing in the downstairs room. Up here will just be stereo.
Yeah, well, that's pretty exciting. Well, speaking of binaural, I mean, and I think you mentioned Chad Blake earlier to me, but I mean, Chad, he always was sticking a binaural mic head into recordings, just throwing it in there for fun, just to do cool stuff.
Well, Pearl Jam named a record binaural because of Chad, right?
Yeah.
So
now, are you? Did you mention something about going to Mix with the Masters and doing that stuff?
Yeah. Actually, I'm going to Studio La Fabrique in France, end of May of this year, to spend a week with Chad and 15 other lucky people who are spending a crap ton of money to go to France. But
so Rockstars, by the time this comes out, if Chaz is not back yet, then we need to go. We need to rush over there.
Send a search party.
They ate him for lunch or something.
Oh, Jesus.
So tell us about Mix with the Masters, and you're going to work with Chad on that one?
Yeah. So yeah, Chad's doing one of his week-long seminars, and there's a bunch of people I'd like to go see, but it's not cheap, and you can't, go spend that much money because I've got Atmos speakers I have to buy, so I'm just going to do one Mix with the Masters with Chad and go.
That's exciting though. That's really fun. And I mean, some people go and spend all their money on alcohol on a beach. I'd rather spend it on music myself.
Yeah, like a 58 Les Paul or something, but so we're actually my wife, who was born in Lakenheath, England, grew up in the Philippines and in the Alps. So it turns out that in her old home she grew up in Italy is now a bed and breakfast. So we're going to fly a week or so early before Mix with the Masters, and then rent a car, drive to her old Alps home,
super fun,
and then take a train from northern Italy down to the southern part of France where the studio is for Mix with the Masters. And then I think while I'm doing that, my wife and my youngest stepson are going to go to Barcelona and go bomb around and do stuff like that because the public transportation in Europe is awesome with the trains and everything. So so I'm buying power adapters and getting my stuff ready for that. But again, it's one of those things where it's all the big studios are not the opportunities to hang out in studios are gone for a lot of people, especially in mid-market towns. If you're in a big music capital, you're in New York, LA, Nashville, of course, or maybe Atlanta or Miami or something, there's still maybe some opportunities. But if you're in Boise or, or Boulder, Colorado, or Buffalo or Rochester, I mean, those opportunities to go hang out and just absorb stuff aren't there. So if I got to pay to go do a master class, and go hang out with someone, I'm fine with that. It's because it's helping the studio out, it's helping the people out. And actually I was hoping to come to your thing, which is like
well, it'll be in the past at this
yeah.
point, but yeah. Next one for me, which
May 4th and 5th, right?
well, Rockstars, we're Colin Dupuy's coming down to my studio, and I'm going to be doing this. Of course, that will have already happened, but I'll be doing more here at the Toy Box. So
because it's
going to be really fun. I mean, it's going to be a lot of fun. I just want to, same thing you said, I want to make more of an opportunity for us to just get together and hang in studios and really like make a great weekend out of it.
Because, you know, I in 2020, was it? I was going to come down to the one you were going to do with Craig Elvin, but then COVID hit.
Right.
So we did it online. I was like, damn, but it was still awesome.
It still was fun.
It was a lot of ridiculously awesome. And then this one, this is the weekend of my 10th wedding anniversary. So if I come to Nashville and blow off my 10th wedding anniversary, it'll be my last wedding anniversary, I think.
Good call.
So,
priorities.
Yeah. So, you know, just find ways to stay engaged with people and find ways to like make friends and network. And, you know, like Andrew Shep says, don't be a dick. Just go be nice and have fun and, you know, and absorb stuff.
Well, it sounds like what you're building there in Buffalo. Maybe your place is a place to bring everybody to at some point, because it sounds like it'd be a pretty amazing spot.
Yeah, well, we're talking to PMC. We're going to do all PMC speakers in here, and
great
for the Dolby, and they're North American. They're head of their North American operations, Ted, whose name is Ted White. It turns out he's from Buffalo. His mother was born in an old farmhouse on the same road that we live in.
Wow.
So shout out to PMC, Ted, and Ted's mom, who's from like South Wales, New York, was born in a farmhouse on Hunters Creek Road. Like, so yeah, it's just weird how that. Well,
maybe
happens,
if we come do a mixing mastermind clinic at Electric Owl Works, I don't know how far it is, but maybe our day field trip is to go see Niagara Falls, and we'll go record it.
Yeah, well, we can do that. Maybe I can call the guys at GCR, because that's a cool John Stork room. Maybe we can get a little tour there.
Yeah, cool. Rockstars, let us know in the comments if that sounds like fun. I mean, everything's relative.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think is wonderful about this podcast, and it's a dream of mine, is to basically take the mixing mastermind on the road. And find studios that are more regional for everybody, so that people can come to a hub from around an area and get together for a weekend of awesome music making.
Yep. Well, yeah, you know, you and I had discussed this back in Chicago, because you had a mixing thing at Shirk Studios with Anthony, which was like 2019 also.
I think it
was like September 20. Yeah, it was like a couple months after NAMM.
Yeah, it was the first one that I did. So Rockstars, we got everybody together at Steven Shirk's studio, which is called Shirk Studios.
Yep.
In Chicago, and then Anthony Gravino came up, and that particular one was put on, sponsored by OWC.
Yeah, awesome.
So we just crammed. We brought 20 people into a really cool studio, and we found space for everybody, and it was a blast.
Oh, it was awesome. Yeah, let's do it.
All right, cool. So before we just move on to the next thing, keep talking about what does it mean for you to consider Atmos in a room like that? What are some of the nerdy, boring physical considerations that we all need to take into consideration if we want to do something?
Well, there's two basic Atmos setups that Dolby recommends, and I am by no means an expert on this, but one is called a near field setup, which is basically the speakers are kind of, you know, roughly 9 feet by 11 feet by like 8 feet above you. And then one is called, I think it's called oblique. And that is where you have the speakers like all the way pushed out, like built into the walls, like a Capitol or something like that, or in a bigger room. And they both present different challenges. So if you have like the oblique, I think it's called, you have everything kind of soffit mounted or wall mounted. So that is good acoustically for some things, but what it does is it puts your listening spot kind of like off in a way, because unless the room is custom designed for the Dolby like width and all that, it's going to be off. So you're gonna have to do time delays and things. So the sound arriving at you in the sweet spot is all hitting properly in phase and in time. when you do a near field setup, you pretty much put them where they're supposed to be for the listening spot. And then you might just have, fractions of a millisecond that it's off. As long as you get like your laser tape measures out and measure everything right, you'll be real close. But it's real important that everything's hitting you, it's phase coherent, and the time is right. So
now,
Dolby has.
So that's what you're going to do. You think you might?
Yeah.
Do that?
Well, actually, we're working with PMCs because Ted has I started this, and Ted then kind of did a better job on it. But there's a thing Dolby has called the Dolby Dart, which is a spreadsheet where you fill in your room dimensions and what speakers you have and all that, and it spits out like the best place to put the speakers in the room, what angle they should be at, and what SPL they should be pushing to like meet the Dolby spec. So yeah, there's some geeky stuff, and the Dolby Dart, it's just like a spreadsheet thing you can download with like built-in macros and formulas that it basically does the calculations and spits out stuff and tells you like, where you should put your speakers. And it has a bunch of different speaker manufacturers and models in there, so it kind of knows what their frequency response is, and it knows what their SPL is, like, because the Atmos spec, you're supposed to have 20 dB of headroom. So if you're monitoring at 85 dB in your control room, you should have 20 dB of headroom in your speakers,
right,
for the max SPL they're pushing.
Yep.
So all that stuff has to be taken into account, and then your acoustic treatment, which is, in some ways you just want to like make it. I don't want to say you want to make the room as dead as you can, but you also want to. You don't want it too live for an Atmos room.
Right, because the speakers are now coming at you from all directions.
Yep.
So you don't want some of the speakers bouncing like crazy off walls.
Yep. So it just gets into a lot of math, basically math and lasers, and that's cool.
Awesome. Empirical Labs, creators of the iconic Distressor, offer high-performance gear for audio professionals. The Fatso, or Full Analog Tape Simulator and Optimizer, brings the warmth of vintage tape and tube electronics to your digital recordings. Perfect for mixes, masters, or overdubs by adding harmonic generation, high-frequency saturation, tape emulation, and compression. The impressive new Pump, a 500 series classic knee compressor, shares its DNA with the analog Distressor and Arouser plugin. It features 8 selectable compression ratios, precise attack and release controls, saturation, a high-pass filter, and a first-time ever attack mod for added transient control, which is ideal for adding more snap to your snare drum. All Empirical Labs products are hand-assembled and tested right down to the circuit boards in northern New Jersey, USA, for durability and performance, designed to last and be easily updated. Go to empiricallabs.com to find the Arouser and Big Freak plugins, where you can use the coupon code RSR10 for 10% off. Remember to follow @Empirical Labs on Instagram, making studio gear that works a little easier, a little better, and a lot longer. Elevate your music production with the updated Complete 15 bundle from Native Instruments, featuring the new Contact 8. This comprehensive collection includes a fantastic range of versatile synths, sampled instruments, and innovative studio effects, giving you everything you need to bring your creative vision to life. Whether you're composing emotional scores, crafting deep dance floor grooves, or experimenting with unique sound design, Complete 15 has got you covered. Discover powerful plugins and instruments that guide you from the initial idea to the final mix. The included Contact 8 introduces exciting new tools like chords and phrases for instant inspiration, the Leap tool for dynamic looping, and Conflux, a cutting-edge hybrid instrument that merges organic and synth sounds in real time. Plus, enjoy revamped versions of Massive X and Guitar Rig 7 Pro to take your sound even further. Then, polish off your mixes with the AI-enhanced iZotope Ozone 11, included in the Complete 15 bundle. Use the code ROCK10 for 10% off at nativeinstruments.com. Hey, Rockstars, we're back now for the jam session, aka the second half of the show. My guest today is Chaz Root, joining us from Electric Owl Works studio in South Wales, New York. Chaz, you ready to jam, dude?
Absolutely. But it has to be an F sharp or C sharp.
F sharp or C sharp. Is that because you only play the zither?
No, that's because Foxy Lady by Hendrix was F sharp and C sharp was Gimme Shelter by the Stones.
Why was Foxy Lady an F sharp? I thought it was an E, but I probably just was playing it and learning it in the wrong key.
I don't know. Maybe my turntable was playing at the wrong speed when I was a kid. I always played it at F sharp.
Well, you know, it's funny. Speaking of which, you know, there was such an era of rock and roll where the pitch of what the final song was entirely dependent on what they decided to do for radio and stuff like that. They would speed up tracks a little bit.
Oh yeah,
and it
yeah.
would actually change the tuning of a song.
Yeah, they do it in mastering. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I remember coming across that as a kid trying to learn songs. It was like, how the hell do they tune that? Because they would change on an album between songs. So, you know, and then you'd have like, you know, When the Levee Breaks by Zeppelin, where they, you know, they slowed it down by like from an A to a G or a G to an F or something like that, which is part of what gives it that dirgy sound and it made Bonham's already cool drums in that foyer sound even bigger. Cause like you vary speed stuff down and holy crap, it sounds amazing.
Yeah.
You know?
Dave Kalmusky talked about doing that intentionally as part of a production where they would track the drums a little fast to tape and then slow it back down to transfer it in to finish the song out just to make it sound heavier.
Oh, it's amazing. Yep. Good stuff.
Well, you know, and that's a cool trick because if you think about it, sure, it slows it down and it might sound tempo-wise looser and sloshier, but it also does things like take all the upper frequencies of the cymbals and the drums and pitch them down to lower frequencies. So it changes the, you know, it changes the frequency response of the drums and probably takes that nasty high frequency out of the cymbals and just shifts it down into, I don't know, the nasty mid-range. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, you know, people have been, you know, this was a trick that Craig Elvin went over in your mastermind thing with him, where he was using the UA Studer tape plugin as a de-esser, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, just gently rolling off the highs is, you know, kind of can be pleasing. And for those of us who are a little older, we're used to hearing stuff that way because that's how it was recorded. And, you know, when you plug a, you know, certain mics in, you know, like a Neumann 87 or something like that, they're really bright. I mean, they've got that upper mid and that high end, like low high end bump. And back in the day, you needed to compensate because you were going to tape. Now, when you're doing it all through digital, it just can be really brittle and harsh.
Yeah.
So, you know, you know, they were working with what they had back then and making it work. And, you know, now you can do that with plugins or if you got an old tape machine around. But yeah, it's all fun.
Since you've been doing this for a minute, and you've seen an evolution from tape to digital, do you feel like you were aware during the transition of those two formats that you were aware of certain microphones that went in and out of favor and stuff like that?
Yeah, well, yeah,
or you just learned to just deal with them differently.
Yeah, because I mean, you know, like the AKG 414s, or what else? You know,
well, what's funny is the 414s, the BULS, which is the one I got, was a darker mic, the older version.
Yeah,
and then the more modern ones became brighter.
Yeah,
maybe it was just a reflection of modern musical tastes and styles, or maybe it was just the circuitry inside.
Because like in the late 90s, I was working at a studio. It was like a part-time gig, but there was a studio in South Buffalo called Elvis the Cat Recording Services. And that was a classic late 90s, mid to late 90s studio that had, it had like 6 ADAT machines and a bunch of Mackie mixers wired into each other, classic. And, it was advertised as a 24-track room, which is why there were 3 8-track ADATs, because you had 3 working, 2 out for repair, and 1 on the shelf as a backup. Yeah. And you were always doing like this, rotating thing of keeping your ADATs up and running and getting them to sync and all that stuff. But, I'll be honest, if somebody, and actually, if there's anybody out there who hears this, I am up for this challenge. If somebody wants me to record a record with a bucket full of 57s and 58s and an old PV live mixer from the 80s, I'll do it because you can totally do it. I know a guy who used to own another recording studio who recorded an album in his carriage house with an old PV mixer that he borrowed from a buddy, and the album sounds amazing. They cut vinyl. This is like 89 or 90 maybe. And
yeah, that's one of the things that's fun about doing the studio thing is, in a lot of ways, a smart move is to differentiate yourself as a studio from the same thing that everybody else is doing. So if everybody's got, the latest DAW and the latest plugins and all the clean sounding everything, it could actually be more effective to set up a really simple old mixer and a bunch of dynamics. I was just thinking you could name your studio Dynamic Sound or something like that.
Yeah, right.
That's literally all it is. But I had an intern at my studio who was way into 4-track music. Like that was,
me too.
All about that. And I was like, at one point I encouraged him, I was like, maybe you should just maybe it'd be cool to just create a 4-track studio where there's no modern gear. It's only a variety of cassette recording formats. And that's what people come to make records, for that sound. I mean, those were really particular sounds. I mean, I think of Guided by Voices. I think of Ween. What were some other artists that really stood out for their 4-track records?
Well, there was one that was interesting. It was sort of a cult album status at this point, but Cotton Mather had an album called Kontiki.
Oh, yeah.
And I think there was
Cotton Mather.
And I think that was recorded in a condemned house that was about to be torn down, like in Austin, Texas or something like that. But the final album is a mix of 4-track and I think ADAT and whatever. And it's kind of like a Sparkle Horse or Mark Linkhouse thing in a way where you get like all these different sounds. I mean, not unlike a Chad Blake thing with like found sounds, but you just have all these sounds that you blend into this amazing like finished piece of art, right? Yeah. And doing it with a 4-track, Bruce Springsteen did that like Nebraska record, I think,
Nebraska,
or something.
Exactly, was done that. In fact, I had a artist in Nashville who bought the exact same 4-track because of that record, and he brought it, recorded everything, then brought it into my studio, and we did all the tape transfers to get it into Pro Tools for him.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, that's why I was saying just a minute ago, like, give me a bucket of 58s and 57s, because, Bono from U2 and Springsteen and what's his name, the singer for Bad Company, why am I blanking on his name?
I'll come to you. You keep going. I'll look it up.
Yeah. They all sang into they often sang into 57s and 58s, right? Paul Rogers.
Paul Rogers.
Paul Rogers. Yeah. He sang into a 57 going into like a DBX 160. And that's how he got the sound on those records. It's
and
like
Tom Shultz, Boston, that was a lot of 57s, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, he had like the basement studio back in the day. Actually, he had the same console that Trackmaster had. It was an Auditronics 532. So all those demos he did that turned into the first Boston album were in his basement with an Auditronics. I think that was 16-track he did. I'm not sure. But I talked to him on the phone when I was a kid, because when the radio station, like when the big rock shows would come into Buffalo, they would always go to this 97 Rock radio station and they'd be like on the air. So they'd be like, yeah, we're having a concert tonight at the stadium or the auditorium and blah, blah, blah. And like you could call in and stuff and ask questions. So what I would do is, instead of calling the studio line, this is when I was in high school, I would call the main office number of the radio station when I was like 15, 16 and say, hey, this is so-and-so from the Boston Road Crew. We're down at the Aud and have a problem with the amps. Can we talk to Tom? Like Tom Shultz. So I did that, and I got on the phone with Tom Shultz, talked to him for like half an hour, and Rick Nielsen from Cheap Trick and all that shit. And me and my brother were always pulling stunts. Like my younger brother Chris and I were like the Buffalo version of the Lord Alge brothers, just, always stirring stuff up and, but
and what was the name of the group that was doing prank phone calls cassettes in the 90s too?
Oh, not the Beastie Boys, the something. Yeah, those guys. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah. Cool, man. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, so Tom Shultz, of course, those iconic guitar sounds, that was the Rockman. He invented the whole Rockman line of direct guitar recording.
Yeah, and that chorusy flanger sound on those is still pretty like desired, like that, and a jazz chorus amp from the 80s. Those two clean sounds are like all over Def Leppard records and stuff like that, and and they're great. Like I've got a vintage jazz chorus downstairs that if I plug I've got like two Rhodes and a Whirly. And if I plug one of those into it and just pop two 57s or two matched like condensers in front of it, it just sounds like $1 million. It just sounds great. Yeah, it's just amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah, great stuff.
All right, so let me jump in and start talking about some recording stuff with you. One of the records in your discography, which we have linked to in the show notes, Rockstars, you can click through and go listen to a bunch of Chaz's work. Johnny Revolting. Speaking of swearing on the podcast, the song is called Don't Give a Fuck. Great fast tempo punk rock track. Talk a little bit about that style, that session if you want to, or just recording that style of music and, just recording punk rock.
Well, the Johnny Revolting stuff, they're in my demo reel because they're one of my mastering clients. So the Johnny Revolting stuff came out in maybe the early to mid 90s. I did not record it. I did not do the original mixes, but they wanted it remastered and put out on the streaming services. So that's, so this is my mastering engineer thing. I getting called to do mastering gigs all the time. So I did not record that stuff. Although they have been talking about recording an album and they want to do it with me. And I'm like, cool. And these guys have been a band for like, since 90 or 94 or something, but
still it brings up the questions of, thrashing high speed punk rock
these guys
bands.
Are amazing.
What are some of the challenges that you're likely to run into in either the recording, the mixing, or have to solve later in the mastering? What are some typical things that
some typical things that I've seen with that, with my experience with other bands and those guys, is bleed can be an issue if everybody's recording. So depending on the recording environment. So I'm a big fan of like setting people up like Glenn Johns does, where you have like the drums in the middle, if you can, and then gobos on either side of the drums, and then the back of the amp kind of coming up to like the front of the bass drum. Like if you draw a line on the front of the reso head of the bass drum, and then gobo out on either side, and then have amps on either side of that. And that actually, you get surprisingly little bleed doing it that way. And a lot of bands are comfortable playing that way if they're bands that gig a lot, because they're used to setting up on a stage like that. So it's natural for them. And so it maintains the sight lines they're used to, but you've got to be careful with bleed. And, in the old days, it was a lot tougher with all the modern tools like, Oxford Drum Gate or things like that, or the vocal denoise tools. You can deal with a lot of that. But
it's funny that you bring that up. So vocal denoise would imply that those sessions might actually have a live vocal mic in the room with the band.
Yes,
very much like a rehearsal, right?
Yeah, and I did a lot of 4-track recordings in the late 80s through the 90s, like on location recordings that ended up on the radio and stuff. So I was doing like pre-production for a lot of bands, and basically I would take my 4-track setup my little rack thing with a couple compressors and digital reverb echo and my 4-track stuff and mics and Snake, and just go set up wherever the band's rehearsed. So it could be a dedicated like rehearsal space. It could be a basement or an attic or wherever.
And the beauty of the future is, I mean, we're living in the future is now, rock stars.
Yeah.
But the beauty of these tools now is, for example, isotope rebalance. I think you can get like 9 dBs of additional gain on stuff. So it can take a 2 mix. It could take a finished mix, and you could boost the vocals like I might be off with my 9 dB, but that's just off the top of my head.
It's pretty substantial because I've been playing with a slightly older version of
rebalance.
Yeah, of rebalance. So like version 9, I think I have. So because actually there was another album that I recorded 94 or 96, somewhere in there, and this was recorded in the Finger Lakes in a like 250-year-old barn, this Americana band. And we had recorded a 4-track, and then I mixed it in a proper studio. But I was just talking to the to the band leader guy of that band, who now owns a distillery. He makes whiskey and vodka in Buffalo, which is awesome.
Nice.
But
that makes the guitars more in tune.
Yeah, but I mean, I was like, we should really, if you don't have those multi-tracks, those 4 multi-tracks anymore, maybe we should remaster it and get it up on the streaming platforms, because it came out as like a CD only thing back in like the mid 90s. And so I've been playing with rebalance, but there's some pretty amazing technology out there. And, but dynamic mics can be your friends for these live kind of sessions, especially if you're in a smaller space that you're getting a lot of bounce back or they're not treated well. I have a pair of like Woodstock era Shure Unisphere microphones. They're kind of like the predecessor to the 58.
That sounds cool. Just hearing you describe the name of it sounds cool.
Well, yeah, it's the Shure Unisphere, and actually they were the microphones that like Clear Mountain and those guys used to record all the live sound at Woodstock. So if you look at Woodstock, you see like the same microphone looks like a 58 on the overheads, on the voice, on the guitar amps, on the bass, on everything. It's the same mic.
Wow.
But they're an omnidirectional dynamic mic. It's a Shure Unisphere. I forgot what the model number is, but I got 2 of them. And I used to use those for overheads, like in these sessions, because they worked really well, and I mean, famously in the 70s, there was a thing that was called the $300 drum sound that, what was the engineer's name? Bruce something. But he had recorded the first Hall & Oates album in like 75 or 76. And the like top 40 single off that was called Sarah Smile. Right. And if you go back, rock stars, go back and listen to Sarah Smile, every mic on the drum set is a 57. And I'm like,
right on.
And so like in $1975, it was like $300 worth of microphones. So they called it the $300 drum sound. And if you Google that, I'm sure it'll come up. But it was literally just a bunch of 57s. And yeah, it sounds like dead 70s drums, but it's amazing. It's like, but in situations like this, so you got a loud thrash band or something, right? If you're recording Motorhead in a controlled environment, you can pop up some Neumanns or some, maybe put an RE20 or something in front of like Lemmy's amp back in the day. But if you're like in a crazy live environment or recording a gig at a venue, sometimes those really sensitive, like large diaphragm mics can actually be a bit of a pain. So they'd be great for like maybe a drum overhead, but you don't want to put them like on your amps. And I know actually Steely Dan, one of their last tours they did, they were using like the Cascade Fatheads as the mic on the guitar cabs.
Wow.
Right?
I don't have the Cascade Fatheads. I think I've used them on somewhere else before, but I've heard great things about them for ribbons.
Yeah, we've got I think 4 of them. We've got a matched pair and then 2 other ones. Now Cascade does not make they're kind of out of business or got bought out, so it's not called the Cascade Fathead anymore. I think the company that took it over, it's now called like the Big Head or something like that. But they had all kinds
One
of
of my
great,
favorite characters from Silicon Valley.
Yeah. But they had an option for upgraded transformers, so you could put like Lundahl's in there and stuff like that. But those Cascade Fatheads, they're great on drum overheads and yeah. But see, these things can like be your friend in certain environments, because the other thing you can do with a mic like the Fathead, or right, since it's a figure of 8 pattern, it has a really nice null on the sides. So you can set people up in a room and aim the microphones a certain way where it's just like not picking up certain sounds. And
Yeah,
that's
a good reminder. Good reminder. Rockstar's figure 8 mics. When the whole band's in the room and you want to avoid the bleed, use those figure 8 mics and just point the rejection at whatever else the other instrument is that you want to.
But some bleed can be awesome, and I embrace it in certain environments.
Are you sick of searching for the right cable only to realize it doesn't even exist? Or maybe you're asking yourself, how in the world do I hook my studio up? Well, say goodbye to those headaches, because Trace Audio can get you wired up right. Based in Nashville, but serving studios nationwide and around the world, Trace Audio specializes in custom cables, labels, and wiring solutions. From labeling your patch bay to wiring your full studio or large format console, Trace Audio does it all, whether you're a home or pro studio owner. And the real game changer is Trace Audio's custom patch bay label designer. It's a one-stop tool to color code, organize, and design labels for your 1/4-inch or XLR patch bays. No more wondering where things are on your patch bay, when instead you can have sleek, professional labels that are easy to read and easy to use. Try the free online patch bay label designer at traceaudio.com and use the code RSR15 to get 15% off your custom labels and take your studio to the next level.
Did you know that one of the most common fears with audio mastering is not knowing if your mix is ready or not? Look, nobody wants to send a mix in for mastering only to realize there's some resonating low end that's going on that wasn't picked up in the mix. That's where I come in. Hi, I'm Brian Murphy of Sound Porter Mastering. As soon as you send a mix for me to listen to, I'm already on your team. Mix feedback and master readiness is a service I offer for free, and for good reason. That's because a great mix produces an even greater master. So if I can help you minimize oddities and issues and even provide some advice that will help your mix translate better, then mastering becomes more efficient and effective. And you don't stress about those issues at all. Just go to soundporter.com. There you can find videos, a FAQ, and a pre-mastering checklist on my website that will explain a lot of what you need to know. When you're ready for great feedback, just reach out via my low-friction contact form and send me a mix to hear. Again, you can find me at soundporter.com.
So one of the things I wanted to conclude when we were talking about isotope rebalance, for example, is it's presented a little bit as like, oh, you can go into a finished mix and readjust the vocal level or the bass or drums, for example. And it's great. And in fact, I just did it mastering a record that's about to come out. It'll be out by the time this comes out, called Eyesight, for one of the records that I've done with my band. We keep changing our band name. I think it'll be under Three Fried Men for this one. But anyway, it's part of the Poetry Scores project. That one, I used it to adjust the vocal level, adjust the bass level, or tweak the drum level, depending on the mix. But what you can do, which is thinking a little bit outside the box, is you talked about a vocal in the room tracking with the band. Right there, it's a perfect opportunity. You can put it on that vocal and crank the vocal way up and turn down, thereby turning down the rest of the band in the vocal mic. Yep. And I mean, the John Lennon vocal extraction for the last Beatles song, when Steve Janowick was on the podcast, we were talking about him recording strings on that track. John had sang vocals and piano, and Peter Jackson and his crew had actually gone in and done like a very advanced version of this where they extracted the vocal completely from the vocal and piano recording.
Yep.
It's such a quality that you don't even really notice that anything was done to it.
I think I saw a Pure Mix video or something like that with Michael Brower, and Pure Mix with the Masters. And I think he got some old like basement recordings that Aerosmith had done. Shout out to Boston. And And he had kind of used the rebalance to get like a more modern sound out of it. And you know what you can do with that is you can actually bounce those like tracks out. So like if you're soloing just the vocal or just the drums or the guitars or whatever, you can bounce those out as separate tracks. And then I think that the trick with rebalance, and this is what I've been experimenting with in that mid 90s project I was talking about, is I got to keep the old mix there, because if you bounce out just the like soloed rebalanced things, you hear the artifacts, but you can get enough in there where you can, you know, enhance it. You know, it's still going to sound like an Aerosmith like basement recording from 1971, but it just sounds better.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the technology just keeps advancing. So by the time this comes out, you know, some new update could have happened where, you know, it's even better than it was.
Yeah. Apple will have like the M22 chip out and, you know, right.
Yeah. Well, cool. So, all right. Well, so doing the punk rock stuff, it's great that you've got those things. What about when you do go to master, for example, when you mastered this, did you find that there were any tricks that helped with just sort of buildup of upper mids or cymbals or any of that kind of stuff?
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to remember, because I think I've done like 3 or 4 records for those guys, and each one was a little different. But they were typical 90s kind of recordings. So like early to mid 90s, maybe late 90s. So they certainly had more low end in them than like an old 70s record would. But by modern standards, like if that was to, my goal with them and the discussion I had with them is like, look, if somebody wants to put you in a playlist on Apple or Spotify, like, do you want it to sound like it's from 1990, or do you want it to sound, more like a modern punk thing, like a Green Day or like a new, like new rock or whatever kind of thing from the early 2000s? Like what do you want to, go for? And a lot of that is client driven. So, if I hear things like harshness, things like that, I would certainly, tell them about it. So those old Husker Du records we're talking about, amazing songs, amazing records, but there was like no low end and there was so much high end. It's like, if you were going to remaster that, would you want to remaster it to make it sound more modern, or do you just want to kind of, clean up like the mistakes there, but not alter it and change it as a total like remix remaster thing? So a lot of that is client driven. So if I hear things that are bad, I'll certainly address them. And that's where like mid-side can become your friend. And, sometimes you hear things in the middle, and luckily for a lot of rock and pop stuff, kick, bass, snare, and vocals are straight up the center. So you can do things to just kind of work. Say you have like a low mid build up in a vocal, you can do that in the mids and it doesn't hurt the stuff on the sides so much, but you could have like an acoustic guitar where where it's really boomy. So then if they're pan left and right, then, side EQ, doing the sides is your friend. And like FabFilter Pro Q3, its dynamic EQ thing's pretty cool because you can tell it to do mid, side, or stereo, and then you can split the stereo so it'll treat the left and right separately. So it's doing left and right as 2 separate audio channels as opposed to like mid-side, and that can be your friend in mastering too. So, and now I've been contemplating pulling the trigger and getting the Eventide split EQ, which I have not played with yet, but that thing looks like it can do some pretty cool tricks that would be handy in mastering because, I get all these weird, like, I don't say weird, I just get all these unexpected projects showing up that I'm like, okay, I'll try it, see if I can make it work, Yeah. And it's good because it keeps me active. It keeps me like mentally engaged, and like I have to be creative in problem solving, right? So, but one trick I do, if something's already been if something was like destroyed in previous mastering or in a mix bus where somebody's slamming like an SSL compressor at 4-to-1 with 4 to 6 dB of gain reduction and the mix is just like squashed, sometimes what I'll do is I'll use an expander, right? And So I'll like with FabFilter Pro MB, there's a little trick you can do where I can pick a sonic frequency, let's say around 60 hertz where a kick drum is, right? And use that like little, let's say 40 to 80 range as a side chain to trigger expansion, let's say in the upper mids or in the highs. So every time that kick drum hits, Pro MB is actually expanding it. So that's the squash dynamics that I can't do anything about because of a previous mixer master. I can now give it a little bit of bounce in life, right? And you can play with, mid-side stuff with that or just do it on the side. So there's all kinds of tricks that you can do when you get these old recordings that come in.
That's cool. That's a good tip. And I think, some of that stuff may feel a little advanced, and I think sometimes it is. And I think the answer is to just play around with that stuff, rock stars, and just experiment, try some things, because you probably have to mess it up a few times before you figure out how to get sweet spot. In fact, when I was at NAMM and I was hanging out with Dave Durr, and he was trying to demonstrate the British mode in the distressor, he said, like, well, you got to get this just right. And even that took, there you go. Chaz is wearing his ELI as a Empirical Labs t-shirt right now. But like even Dave demonstrating that one technique, he pointed out, like, you got to hit the sweet spot just right before you hear it, And the other thing that comes to mind is, I remember doing a session with Steve Albini, and we were in there with the Living Things, and we had recorded the drums in our home studio environment and then brought them in, and he was helping us mix it. And we had a distressor. In fact, this is another distressor story. And so what do? We put the distressor on the snare because it sounds fucking great, Yeah. And so we recorded it that way. And of course I overcompressed it. And so by the time we went to mix, it was like there wasn't enough life left in it. And he did the coolest shit. He pulled out, it was a BBS or something like that, expander compressor.
The BBE.
BBE, yeah.
Yeah,
and he
I got
re-expanded it. He re-expanded the snare to bring out a little more body and dynamic range in it. So he basically did some trickery to help uncompress it a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, still no substitute for just getting it right in the first place, but
absolutely,
it's fun to discover these ways to, treat stuff, overdo it, and then pull it back with some of these tools if you can figure it out.
Well, yeah, and the thing is like I've always been sensitive to sound, and I think it's because I'm blind in one eye pretty much, and I was, with my vision impairment, I think I became more sensitive to sound. So, those 2 years of high school, just sitting around with, EHX pedals and guitar and stuff, like I would just sit there and play with sounds because I was like kind of trapped in a room for the better part of 2 years, and just really fine tuning on it. And so I don't want to say it's like a work ethic thing, but that curiosity to play with sounds and experiment, like, hasn't left me. Like, I'm still all for, like, somebody comes in and if somebody wants to do a recording session and they're like, hey, I heard about this technique, can we try it? Or, but I'm always the first one to pull out like a garden hose and put a 57 on the end of it, like Sylvia Massey,
Oh yeah.
That kind of thing. And I've got like, cases just full of like old cassette recorders that have little, mics in them that have built-in compressors and limiters, and you can just take the output and, put it into your snake, into your interface. And like that old 70s cassette recorder drum sound, which, I remember borrowing my grandparents' cassette recorder, and I was like, man, those drums sound really cool. And it's because it's pretty much like the sound of going through like a talkback mic, kind of like the Phil Collins thing, right? Where you're going through like a talkback mic and a limiter on a board. Or the Shure, the Devil Lock plugin does a similar thing where it just like has this limiting squash thing that it does, and just finding ways to beat up sound. It's like, just play with the plugins. Like if you have downtime, go in and do it, experiment. It's not going to cost you anything, and and just have some fun and mess with stuff.
Yeah, I think that's groovy. Have you ever tried some of the other cool things with 57s where you like stick them in those 5-gallon water jugs, or actually even the one I want to try is where you wrap the 57 in a plastic bag and drop it into water and turn it into a hydro mic.
Yeah, I saw Mark at Blackbird do that, but I don't think he used a plastic bag. I think it was a different sort of liquid-proof device he employed, but I think, but yeah, I've seen that done. I've never done that. I mean, I've never done that one, although I'm tempted to, but yeah, I mean, actually, I've
How
been
about
doing
contact mics? Have you ever played around with contact
Oh, yeah,
mics?
yeah, yeah. Actually, I learned, yeah, I have a crap ton of contact mics. Like if you have an old baking sheet, right? Like that you bake cookies on or a pizza in your oven, and you
Mhm.
put a contact mic on it and then a contact speaker, you've just built yourself a plate reverb, right? And it works like really, really well. And you can just epoxy or hot glue gun contact mics onto a piece of sheet metal and basically make your own EMT 140 and just do crazy stuff. So contact mics are amazing. And kind of like PZM mics, right? Boundary mics. You know, just putting them on a wall somewhere, or a technique that I learned actually from Armin Petrie. I think we were recording a Goo Goo Dolls song for either a Batman movie or a Freddy Krueger movie. He had this piece of like styrofoam board. It was like poster board stuff, but really thick. And he had a PZM on either side of it, and he had it flying over the drum set, and he was using them as the stereo overheads. And I was like, well, I've never seen that before. That's pretty cool.
The
But
PZM mics?
yeah. So he basically had this sheet of like, 3 foot by 4 foot or whatever, like poster board thick.
Yeah.
And then on either side of the poster board, he had duct taped like 2 of those modified, like Radio Shack realistic mics. And this is like 90 or 93 or something.
So they're flat against this thing, sort of facing away from opposite directions from each other.
Yeah. And what he did was he split the drum set in half. So basically, like from an overhead perspective, like how you have your 2 overheads.
Yeah.
Right. You want to catch your left side and right side, or what I like to do is more of a Massenburg or Glenn Johns thing where I split between, I draw a virtual line from the center of the snare through where the beater hits the kick drum, and that's my left and right side. And then he hung it about 4 or 5 feet up and use that for stereo overheads, like these PCM mics.
Yeah.
And it was like the coolest thing. And we used to use them to record like room sounds. So like if you have a Marshall stack in a giant room and you want to get a room sound, just put a PZM like in the back of the room.
Right. And because it's on the wall too. So you're not getting any low end cancellation. You're getting the most buildup of
which is why like you've probably seen Steve do this at Electrical in Chicago, but I know he used to put a couple like room mics on the floor, like either
they're the Altec 150s, the Coke bottle Altec mics.
Yeah, he used the Coke bottles, and then he used to. Sometimes I've seen him use the MK012s, the Russian mics. The what the hell is it?
Right, Soyuz.
No, not Soyuz. The Octavas.
Octavas. Yeah, those are great.
Yeah.
The other thing that he would do was the Altec Coke bottle mics. They if you lay them on the ground, the diaphragm is actually maybe an inch above the ground or something like that. He'd actually take some tape and tape them down so they're sort of tilted so that the diaphragm got as low as possible to the ground. I guess if you stomped around on it, it'd pick up the vibration too. But
and that's actually, that concept is actually important and kind of ties into your question about like, recording loud punk rock bands and stuff. It's like microphone placement is key. But like if you're recording a big amp, like let's say a Fender Twin or a AC30 or AC15, right? And the amp sitting on the floor, and you put a 57 like right next to the floor recording it, you're going to get all kinds of comb filtering and phase cancellation. So get that amplifier up on a chair, up off the ground. And how the PCM boundary mics work is that the diaphragm is only like a millimeter or 2 away from the surface, so you're not getting that phase cancellation, right?
Right.
And so the same thing holds true if you're miking an amplifier. Don't put the mic at the bottom speaker on a Marshall 4x12 that's like 3 inches off the ground, because you're going to get weird sound. Put it up on a top speaker, right? So, or if you have a little combo amp, get it up on a chair or one of those amp stand things. Just get it 2-3 feet off the ground. And but PZM mics are amazing. You can do really cool stuff with them and just experiment.
iZotope is truly amazing for mixing and mastering your music, like the new iZotope Plasma plugin featuring flux saturation, which helps you sculpt the harmonics in your sound, enhancing the excitement and clarity of your tracks or mixes. And Ozone, with its built-in mastering assistant, helps you analyze your mix, suggesting all the settings you need for a professionally mastered result based on your chosen style of music and EQ curve, referencing a specific song if you want. Ozone features sophisticated yet simple modules like clarity, impact, low-end focus, stabilizer, imager, exciter, and spectral shaping, along with powerful dynamic EQ, compression, and limiting, allowing you to adjust the settings to your taste so it sounds incredible. And with the magic of master rebalance, you can even manipulate the vocal, bass, and drums separately at the mastering stage. Use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off Plasma Ozone RX or any of the fantastic plugins at iZotope.com. Atom Audio is proud to announce the new D3V active desktop monitor system and H200 dynamic closeback studio headphones designed in Berlin and perfect for pro-level monitoring in a home studio setting. The D3V is a fully active desktop monitoring system featuring 3.5-inch woofers and hand-folded ribbon tweeters for studio-quality sound in a compact form in elegant white or black finish. It's perfect for songwriters, producers, podcasters, and mixers with digital input over USB-C or balanced analog inputs, and includes a headphone output and DSP room acoustic switches. The H200 is Atom Audio's new closed-back studio headphone, featuring 40mm peak drivers and memory foam ear pads in a durable metal construction with a detachable main cable for dual-sided connectivity, making the H200s reliable for demanding studio use. With an impedance of just 32 ohms, they will sound great with your studio or laptop and include a plug-in for enhanced tonal control and stereo spatialization, so you never have to leave the sweet spot. To see the new D3V monitors and H200 headphones, go to atomaudio.com. Yeah, we've been talking on the show about using them as kick drum mics, and I keep meaning to try that again. You just put it inside the kick drum on the bottom on the pillow or whatever.
Yep. It's awesome.
Have you ever taken a closed back guitar cabinet, and laid it on its back so that it's pointing from the floor straight up and then mic'd it?
I have not done that. I know we've tilted them back a little bit.
I guess you can't really do that very easily because usually the jack goes straight up.
Yeah, you'd have to.
I haven't done it either, so that was just an idea I thought of now.
I mean, if you put them on, if you raise it up on cinder blocks, I guess you could do it. I mean, and another trick I learned that actually Armin Petrie, who would be a great guy to get on the podcast because he's got stories, but he this is another Goo Goo Dolls session, but we were recording Johnny's JCM 800 in his 4x12, and I saw him bring out, he had like a 57 and an SM7 on the front of the amp, and then behind the amplifier we were experimenting with taking like the back plate off, and he had like a Neumann, it was either a 67 or 87, but it was behind the amplifier. It was about 18 inches off, like up off the top of the cabinet, pointing it kind of down toward the amp at a 45-degree angle.
Mm-hmm.
And we were experimenting with it was kind of like a top mic and bottom mic on a snare. So you'd have to throw the phase on the back one. And then we were experimenting with getting like that low mid and low sound out of the amplifier that you kind of miss.
Yeah.
So, and I know that Mesa Boogie had a 4x12 that was half closed back, half open back, and you could do it with those. But we were experimenting with a Marshall, and I don't know if we heard about it from a Soundgarden session or some shit like that, but there was something where somebody had either used that Mesa with a half open back, half closed back 4x12, and then put like a Neumann behind it, flip the phase, And then you get all that body, right?
Yeah.
All that tube amp, tasty, chewy body, and flip it out of phase. So I mean, that was a cool trick too. But
yeah, no, I think that's really smart. And I was talking about this recently, but seeing an artist that I work with, Hunter Cross, on stage playing with his amp turned up, and I was like, holy shit, there's a whole level to his guitar sound that we weren't even tapping into in the studio yet, which was, you know, on the one hand, sometimes you hear stuff like that and you're like, oh, I messed up. And then on the other hand, you're like, no, I'm just excited because it's this whole new sound I can go after now.
Yeah.
But, you know, thinking about how to capture it too. Like when
and it's tough. I mean, if you're, you know, we're doing like kind of traditional rock stuff with guitar amps, right?
Yeah.
You can get great sounds out of small amps that sound monstrously huge, right?
Yeah.
And that's like been an old studio trick since the 60s or 70s, you know, going Jimmy Page or before. But capturing a really loud amp wound up, like if you had like an old school Fender Twin or Super Twin or a Marshall half stack or full stack, like recording that stuff, capturing that sound and making it actually work is like a lot tougher. But if you get it, it's, you know, but it's one of those things where you can just like walk around in the live room. And if you're walking around listening, you know, somebody's playing their, you know, amp, playing their guitar, and you start walking around the room, you know, this works with any instrument. You'll hear a spot where it's like, oh, there it is.
Yeah.
Right. So like make a mental note and get a microphone there as soon as possible. And, you know, if that's a good place where it sounds cool, then just put a mic there and record it. But like, that's why I always like having extra mics just set up and plugged into the snake and the tie lines. So I got a couple Jay-Z black holes and just random 57s and 58s and just stuff like laying around that if like I'm just hearing something, I'll just open up that mic and assign it to a track and record it. Cause I'll tell you what, some of the best drum room sounds I've gotten have been from like a scratch vocal mic, somebody's 57 or 58, you know? And what I just did, actually, I just did a mix for a NPR Tiny Desk concert thing for a band up here in the Buffalo area. This band's called David Jonathan and the Inner City Bedlam. And they had recorded this like live, like Tiny Desk style, right? And the drummer is a songwriter, band leader, and lead singer. So the drum sound I was getting out of his vocal mic was like amazing.
That was the secret sauce. Yeah.
It was a 58. So what I did was I just duplicated his vocal track, and then I put one of those like vocal things on it. I think it was like the Supertone Clear, or it used to be called Goyo, right? So it takes room sounds and ambient sounds and vocal sounds, kind of like how Isotope works. And I literally just duplicated the drummer's vocal mic and then took the vocals out with the AI thing. And now I had a room mic that sounded great. And, you know, that's not mixed real high anyway, but, you know, you just do the make it dirty like Vance would do or like Chad Blake would do. Just get it gritty and dirty, run it through a Sans amp and kind of thing. And yeah, it sounds amazing. And
that's awesome.
So, yeah. So, I mean, just play with stuff, man.
That sounds really fun, man. It's fun to talk about this stuff because it just makes me want to go try all these things.
Yeah, you know,
one of the things I still have yet to try is to have a guitar playing into a guitar amp, and then you stand on a chair. Well, you could do this around a singer too, and you literally dangle a microphone, and then you just like spinning a yo-yo, you just kind of spin it around the amp or around somebody's head while they're singing, and you create your own microphone Leslie cabinet.
Oh yeah, that was like the Van Halen trick on that opening sound on their first album, which was a car horn. Yeah, I think that's what they did. I think it was like they were spinning a microphone with a bunch of car horns in the parking lot, then they very speeded it.
Oh, cool.
Like when that Running with the Devil song starts,
yeah,
you said,
yeah.
That was like,
really? No shit.
It was a bunch of, where was that? At Sunset they recorded that or something like that? Yep. I think it was the Sunset parking lot. Somebody was standing in the middle of all the cars. They were holding the car horns down and spinning the microphone. Then they very speeded it and made that noise.
That's brilliant.
I mean, just play with stuff, man. I mean, this, like, people are so worried about, oh my God, I got to time align it. I got to tune it. I got to put it on the grid. I got to just play with stuff first, you know? And I guess I had the luxury of playing as a kid, when I was blind, and then in the 80s when, I was living in the middle of nowhere and had no one to play, be in a band with, and just experimenting. So, it's not a bad thing to do, because you'll discover like happy accidents. Right. So you, one of the things you mentioned in what you sent me before this interview was just the importance of being fearless, which we're talking about with these playful ideas. I mean, it does sometimes help to do them before the session, or give yourself the freedom to experiment sort of off the clock. But sometimes it's good to be fearless and experiment on the clock too. Oh, yeah.
But one of the things that you did that I know for many people is pretty fearful, which is putting yourself on a podcast like this. But you also started up a YouTube channel and started just making YouTube videos.
Oh, that,
so
yeah,
I wanted
like 12 of them or so. It totally, dude, that YouTube channel sucks. YouTube's such a pain in the ass. But yeah, I
so
did.
Talk about that. What was that a being fearless moment for you?
No, because I mean, here's the thing. I like talking. I hate talking about myself, but I do it because I have to. So, which seems weird because I think I mask my fear pretty well. But yeah, I always had terrible stage fright before gigs. And,
yeah,
I was actually shaking before I got on the Zoom call with you here. I was like nervous.
Right on. Well, I'm glad I bring that out.
But the thing is like, me being an old sci-fi fan, I always remember the Frank Herbert quote from Dune, that fear is the mind killer. Right. I will face my fear and let it pass through me, and then all that remains is me, or something like that. So it's just like, you just got to get over it. That's great. But yeah, being fearless and just doing what you got to do. What was your original question? I'm sorry, ADHD or something?
No, that was it. It was the fearless topic, and I just threw in the YouTube reference.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. The YouTube thing. So yeah, I mean, some of the videos, it's funny because you see like really well produced videos where people are like over the top, and I don't want to call anybody out, or because I don't mean it in a bad way, but but you get these really like well produced videos, and all of a sudden people are getting sponsored by Sweetwater or whoever and all that stuff. And that's cool. If that works for you, great. But then you see like, Sylvia Massey's got like an iPhone and she's just walking around filming shit. Yeah. And it's like, to me, like way more engaging. And like, I was trying to get cute and do little skits and stuff. And, because I did go to college for photography. So, I have a background in photography and some video stuff. And
right on.
So I was like, oh, I'm going to get cute and do stuff with anamorphic lenses and do this shit and do little skits and funny stuff. And then I'm just like, And quite honestly, you know what? I've been so busy with DIY studio stuff and just client stuff that like, I don't have time to like do tons of YouTube stuff. So, and it's nothing against YouTube, but I also don't want to get sucked into, because I've seen it happen with people I know, where you get sucked into that YouTube thing. It's like, oh, my views are down 2.6% from last week, and people are stressing and, having blood pressure issues because of YouTube and ad revenue and sponsorships and all that. It's like, that's no way to live, man. That's no way to live.
Well, I think it's an interesting topic to just, to hear your take on it. Because I do think that it is something that a lot of us as studio people consider at some point. We might either think, maybe I should start a YouTube thing. We might think, I need to be more present on social media. I remember when my brother-in-law, when I first started my studio, he was like, dude, you got to get a Facebook thing and start posting. I'm like, what? Why do people want to know what food I'm eating for lunch, whatever it was?
Yeah, I mean, we're posting stuff on TikTok and Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and all that. And, I mean, I put my first YouTube video up like in a year and a half, like at NAMM, because our friend Addie Pargetny, who you interviewed, and thank you for hooking him up. I brought him some Polish donuts from Buffalo. So he was like, what? There's these Polish donuts called punchkis, which are eaten, they're eaten like before Lent. So it's sort of like it's sort of like a Polish like tradition. You're supposed to fatten yourself up before Lent starts and all that. So there's some Buffalo supermarkets and stuff that have. So I put up a YouTube video of me bringing punchkis that we flew in from Buffalo to like Nam, and we're like in front of the Nam sign eating these gigantic, monstrous punchkis, these Polish donuts.
Awesome.
But yeah,
How long is Lent? How long is Lent?
I don't know. I'm not Catholic, so I don't know.
I don't know. But I don't know if you actually stop eating or if you just sort of back off.
No. Well, I think there's dietary rules for Lent, but not being Catholic, or I don't know what those are. But
donut's a good way to start, though.
Yeah, and and there's no meat product in it, so me being the lacto-ovo vegetarian, I can still eat a donut. So
right,
yeah,
that's right. For 15 years, I owned a famous MCI console that came from Criteria Studio C in Miami, where it made many Grammy-winning records in the 1970s, and it sounded amazing. When I was ready to upgrade my studio to full digital mixing, I decided to team up with Rick Carson at Make Believe Studio, Metric Halo, and Golden Ear producer Bill Simzik to recreate the legendary MCI console as the new MBSI plugin. This isn't just another boring plugin. The MBSI captures that same iconic sound that was used on multi-million selling records like Hotel California for the Eagles, produced by Bill Simzik, Saturday Night Fever and Stayin' Alive for the Bee Gees, I Shot the Sheriff for Eric Clapton, We're an American Band for Grand Funk Railroad, and the soundtrack to Grease, and was loved by legendary producers like Tom Dowd, Todd Rundgren, and Bill Simzik, to name just a few. The MBSI plugin not only delivers the authentic sound of the original MCI console faithfully, but it also adds new features like a top-notch compressor, overdrive, and a high and low-pass filter switch. Features I always wished that the console had. Now you too can get that Grammy-winning MCI sound in your home studio, just like me. Whether you're recording or mixing, you can experience the sound of Miami 1976 with the MBSI plugin and soak up a little sunshine in your sound. Go to makebelievestudio.com/MBSI. Are you recording your own music or other people's music in your studio, but you're having trouble figuring out how to get your mixes to sound great? Do they sound weak or distant or lack punch or clarity? Well, I've got a gift to help you take your mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding a lot more like professional mixes. And it's my free course called Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro-sounding mixes from your home studio using free and stock plugins in Pro Tools. And the best part is that these mixing techniques will work for you in any DAW, whether you're in Logic, Cubase, PreSonus Studio One, Reaper, or anything you're using. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and you can use the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. Well, let's see. There was one other comment you made before we close out. That you said in here, and I don't know whether it was something for real to say, but you said you had some thoughts on Donald Hoffman's research into consciousness being fundamental before space-time and the universe.
I said that, didn't I?
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, well, yeah. It's interesting because, I've always had I've always had a fascination with science and tech and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, and both my grandfathers were engineers, and my one grandfather made parts for the moon launches and NASA for like the Apollo program, and both So, my brother and I were both encouraged to explore like technology and, gadgets and gizmos and stuff like that, electronics and whatever. So physics and all that has always kind of fascinated me. And, Einstein, Stephen Hawking, and now Donald Hoffman's doing some amazing research now that it's interesting because his take is that our perception of the universe is kind of flawed because it's through this interface that we call our human body, right? So they're doing these statistical models and analytics to try to figure out it's been sort of a held principle in in physics that space-time is fundamental to our existence, which is like the fabric of space and time. But they're seeing, but there's all these things that physics can't resolve. So they've been looking for this unified theory and all this stuff, and nothing ever works. Nothing ever works. And they've been beating themselves up with supercomputers for decades and decades, and they still can't make it work. And then they're starting to see these weird kind of anomalous things where it's like, well, maybe space-time isn't fundamental. Maybe, consciousness is fundamental. And what we perceive as space and time evolves from this kind of primordial or this more fundamental layer of consciousness. And what's to me is interesting with music is that music would not exist without space-time, because in physics it's called the arrow of time, right? So time always travels forward. You can't go backwards. So you can't have music without time going from one point to another point, right? You can't have moving pictures. Well, you can have pictures, you can have little snippets and photographs, but you can't have moving pictures like a film or video without time going one way or the other, right? So I'm trying to remember why
sort of the idea that like a sound wave propagates through rarefaction of air, and therefore it happens over time.
But my whole thought about that was that, like, without this universe, the existence that we know is reality, right? Like, music wouldn't exist. And it's been getting me thinking, like, what if space-time, like there's like multiverse theories and like all time exists simultaneously and all that. So how would language work? How would music work if all time existed at once? You wouldn't be able to like hit the play button and listen back. Like, if everything existed,
you would have already heard it before it was
made. But if everything exists simultaneously, so Donald Hoffman's doing some absolutely like amazing research, and they're finding these like mathematical geometric structures that exist outside of space-time, and they think that possibly consciousness is like, there's a universal consciousness that exists, and we're just all like little pieces of the universe trying to figure itself out kind of thing. Right. So, but it's just, to me, struck me as like, man, if we didn't live in this reality, like with the arrow of time always moving forward, we wouldn't have music,
Yeah. And then we couldn't buy guitars. That would suck.
No, but Stephen Hawking, said or theorized that if you could do something that would break the laws, of space-time, that the universe probably wouldn't let you do it, kind of thing. So, but it's just all stuff that I see it like dovetails into music and art in some ways, because there's those moments we have when you hear a really cool Atmos mix, or you hear a really cool song, or you like at an art gallery and see an amazing piece of art. You have these like moments that some people will call, life-changing or spiritual, right? You just have these moments that there's something that so fundamentally like impacts you that you can't put words to it.
Yeah.
And certain music does it. Like for me, it's been music, and
well, it's a little bit like waking up from a dream, and maybe you had a dream. Like, have you ever totally written a song in a dream?
Oh yeah, a bunch of times.
And then you wake up, and then it just fades away. It's no longer there, and you can't put it into words.
I've had actual songs I've written in my dreams. Then there's songs that I heard because I left the radio on when like in high school. There were songs that were playing on the radio overnight, and I'd wake up. I'm like, oh, I think I thought of another cool song in my dream. I start playing this song and figuring out what I heard in my head. And then I'm listening to the radio in the car, like going somewhere with my parents. And then the song would come on the radio, and it was like Jackson Browne, the Boulevard song. I remember that. I remember that song because it was like dun 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 dun. It was like that riff, and dun 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 dun. I remember hearing that riff, waking up hearing that riff in my head. I got my guitar, figured it out. It's like later I discovered, nope, I heard it in my sleep. I absorbed it, but yeah,
maybe that was the multi-universe in happening in real time.
But yeah, so yeah,
right on. Well, dude, it's been a blast hanging out with you, man. It's always great to see you. It's fun to just chat with you and see your really cool studio through the video here. Maybe I'll have this video available for you at some point, rock stars. But beautiful place, man. I'd love to come see your studio sometime.
Yeah.
Let me go to this question, which I love to ask our guests, and you've been waiting for it yourself, man. We're going to take the Wayback Studio machine, and we'll go record some car horns, slow them down, and go zip, 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 zip. And then we'll go back in time, and you get to find young Chaz Root. I don't know, the first? I don't know. But you say, listen, Chaz, I've come back to give you this one bit of advice. Here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day. What advice do you want to go back and give yourself if you could?
Not that I want to mess with the fabric of space-time, and change the timeline, but I think I would tell myself to be fearless sooner, because I went through a long period where, I don't want to say like I was a doormat or something, but I was just not standing up for myself enough. So, and this holds true not just in music production or being in bands, but in any part of your life. Just be fearless and take care of yourself, and just stand up for yourself. And if something's fundamentally right, then that's what it is.
Go for it.
So, yeah, I say it would be fearless.
Awesome, man. Well, Chaz, thanks for hanging with us, dude. It's always great to see you. Let the rock stars know. Of course, we'll have links in the show notes, rock stars, if you want to go listen to the records or just click through. But verbally, let them know where should they go find out more about you? What if they're ready to come make a record in a beautiful wooded setting with a stream out the window?
Yeah, our website is www.electricowlworks.com. That's all one word. We're also on Instagram is EOW Audio. Twitter is EOW Audio. I'm pretty sure TikTok is EOW Audio. Yeah, I mean, I'm personally on Facebook, Charles H. Root III and EOW Audio. So yeah, just search for my name or Electric Owl Works or follow the links in the show notes and you'll find me, and feel free to reach out about anything. So
can we just get in a balsa wood boat further upstream and just ride it down until we arrive at the studio?
Balsa wood? Dude,
yeah, it's got to float,
Well, it's pretty steep, so you'd whiz right past us when the water's flowing good.
All right. It's like a miniature Niagara Falls where you are.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty steep. It's not quite 45 degrees, but it's a pretty steep little creek with some waterfalls that you don't want to be in any kind of boat in. So
that's great.
Yeah, right, good times, man.
Hey, Chaz, you're such a thoughtful, wonderful person. I really love getting your Christmas cards every year. So thank you.
Oh, you are welcome.
Rockstars, thank you for listening. And Chaz, I look forward to seeing you next time I see you, man.
We'll see you soon.
All right, cheers.
Be good. Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our awesome sponsors who help make this show possible. iZotope, Native Instruments, Atom Audio, Empirical Labs, Sound Porter Mastering, and Trace Audio. And remember to take advantage of our special coupon codes. At iZotope.com and nativeinstruments.com, use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plug-in purchase. At empiricallabs.com, use the code RSR10 for 10% off the Arouser and Big Freak plugins. And finally, use the code RSR15 to get 15% off your custom patch bay labels at traceaudio.com. If you enjoyed Recording Studio Rockstars, please check out our sponsors using the links in our show notes, because it's a great way to help support this show. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio, and they're going to help you make your best record ever. I would also like to thank our fan fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars: Vlad Weselchenko, Braden Stremming, and Liz Hulitskaya. Thanks so much for listening, Rockstars. We'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.